Hey ecofictologists, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lovis and June is over, so let's talk about all the books I read in the month of June. It was a bit of a crazy month. I took part in Whatever-a-thon, which is a readathon hosted by Maddie over on Book Browsing Blog. And so many people are involved in this readathon, and it was really fun, and it did push me to read more than I usually do. There is a lot to get through in this video, summaries of five books that I read this month, as well as the announcement of the winner of my favorite book of the month, the winner of my favorite book of Q2 of this year, and we found out my favorite book of the first half of 2022. So if you're excited about that, just sit tight and I'll try and talk fast. First up, I read The Lightning Tree, the first in the Ni Revolution trilogy, written by Lene Fogelberg. Ni stands for Natural Intelligence. The basic premise is that Flora, one of the main characters, when she was younger, got hit by lightning while climbing the tree in her garden, along with her little sister, Fonda. Flora walked away with these iconic kind of lightning scars all over her arms and across her torso, but Fonda was not so lucky. A few years down the road, after an end of school party that went terribly wrong, a classmate of Flora's is found in that same tree where the lightning strike happened, entwined in seemingly nothing but branches and twigs and vines, with a great big bloody X on his forehead. And very dead. So what happened to him? Was it a human killer or something else entirely? Before I go on, I'll put a trigger warning here for sexual assault. It's not the R word, it's not incredibly graphic, but it did kind of shock me and it was very unpleasant to read, and it is referred back to throughout the book. So if that is a sensitive topic for you, then I would suggest maybe not this book, and there will be timestamps in the description. You can just skip the summary. I do have to say I flew through this. It didn't take me very long to read at all. You very quickly get very connected to Flora and her connection with her sister Fauna, as well as this mysterious tree in their back garden, and you know, some other kind of mysterious natural phenomena that are happening. You do get invested very quickly. It's a quick read, very intriguing, and when stuff kicks off at the end, I was very distressed. It was very unpleasant. It was painful, actually. It was painful to read, which makes me really want to read book 2. So, well played, Lene Fogelberg. Well played. The second book I read was Jade City by Fonda, which is the first book in the Greenbone saga. It's an adult fantasy, and I picked this up for two reasons. One, I really wanted to. I've heard so much about it. But also, two, I had a hunch that there would be some environmental messages in there. And you know me, I'm always on the lookout for eco-fantasy. And I thought, surely, a story all about wars breaking out over a precious resource, and that resource giving certain families power within a country, surely that has some environmental messages, because I was drawing parallels to something like oil in our reality. I really enjoyed reading this, or rather listening to it, because I did listen to it on audiobook. It is a vividly imagined fantasy world, though sometimes you kind of forget that it's a fantasy world because there are elements of very modern technology. There are TVs and planes and internet and all of these things, so sometimes you have to remind yourself that you're reading a fantasy novel. Of course, the addition of Jade helps with that, which is this precious resource that allows people who are able to wield it enhance their powers and give them kind of magical strength. Did it have an environmental message? Not so much. Not really. I was searching for it. There were a few sentences here and there where I thought, here it is. They talked a little bit about the mining and about if they were showed weakness that other countries would come in and try and take the power from them and the resource from them, but not really an environmental message. So I don't think I would recommend this as an eco-fantasy novel, but I think I will continue with the series through an environmental lens just because it just adds another dimension for me. Also, I was so stressed. I was so stressed out by this book. It is so stressful. I was buddy reading this with a friend of mine, and the number of times we sent each other messages like, "Oh my god, I can't believe that just happened! Holy crap!" Fonda ain't here to play, everybody. She knows how to end a book. and break your heart while doing it. So anyway, that's Jade City by Fonda. Alright, moving swiftly along. The third book I read was No Entry by Gila, and in this book the main character Yale, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that name, Y-A-E-L. I'm gonna say Yale, that's how it is in my head. She's 15 and she has just traveled from Canada to Kruger National Park in South Africa. About a year before the story starts, her brother was killed in a cafe bombing in Canada, and she is very much still processing that grief. She takes part in an elephant conservation program within Kruger National Park, but over the course of the story gets entwined in the horrible and harrowing world of illegal poaching of elephants. So the question really is, can one teenager make any kind of a difference? This book was a bit strange for me. I didn't jive with the writing all that much, and I'm not entirely sure why. I just didn't feel particularly pulled in by the prose. And I didn't really like Yale very much. Reading about a 15-year-old yearning for her boyfriend and pining and talking about him as the love of her life and all of these things, it elicited a few eye rolls from me, which is super hypocritical because 100%, if I had read this when I was 15, I would have lapped this up. I was such a soppy teenager. I was exactly like this. But now I'm almost 30. And I just can't. But anyway, it was exciting. It did pull me through. Another quick read. I don't exactly know how believable it was, but it was a powerful image of the world of illegal poaching, and it did give you kind of a hopeful message of, well, maybe anyone can make a difference. So that's No Entry by Gila. The fourth book I read was Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaghy. Oh my word, I haven't had a book hangover this bad in years. This book was such a roller coaster. The basic premise is that Inti Flynn, who's from Australia, is now running a wolf reintroduction project in the Scottish Highlands. And the Scottish farmers and townsfolk don't like that very much. No, indeed. Everything you're afraid of happening based off of that premise happens. This is twisty, this is heartbreaking, it is powerful, it is beautifully written, 5-star read, 100%. But I have to put a massive, massive, massive trigger warning here, several actually. And those trigger warnings are for sexual assault, which is very graphic, and for domestic violence, which is also very graphic. This is not a light or gentle book, it is graphic and those images linger. It's very, very powerful, but I felt sick at some scenes, which was no doubt the point. So if those are triggers for you, please don't read this without full knowledge of what you're going into. I felt sick. Inti, the main character, has something called mirror touch synesthesia, which is something I had never heard of before, but which means that whatever she sees someone else experience, she also experiences it as though it's happening to her. Someone hugs someone else, you're also hugging her. Someone punches you in the face, she will probably lose consciousness as well. A wolf making a kill, she will taste the blood. That level of empathy, which makes for some very, very interesting scenes. I can't actually formulate any more words about this book. It was fantastic. It was fantastic. I will be remembering this book for a very, very long time. So that was Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaghy. I'm still not really over it. I'm not over it. The fifth book that I read was Where the Oceans Hide Their Dead by John Yunker. This is the sequel to The Tourist Trail, which I very much enjoyed, and I reviewed on this channel like way towards the beginning, and I actually interviewed John Yunker, who's the co-founder of Ashland Creek Press, so you can find those videos linked up here as well as in the description. In the sequel, Robert, who was an FBI agent in the previous book, is now making his way down the African coast searching for Noah, who he thought was dead and now has information hinting that she might not be. And he thinks he might find her on beaches protesting the killing of seals in a very horrible, graphic manner. Yes, this book opens with a graphic description of seal clubbing. Ugh. So I guess trigger warnings here would include animal death and animal cruelty. I think I tried reading this a while ago and couldn't get past the scene of seal clubbing on page like 2, so I needed to put it aside for a time when I thought I could handle it a little bit better. This was that time, and I'm glad I got past page 2, because the rest was great. We've also got other characters. We've got Tracy in the US, who is searching for a man named Neil Cameron, and we've got Amy in New Zealand, who is backpacking with a man who turns out to be Neil Cameron. And he, incidentally, is on the run. All 3 characters, their storylines intertwine and they wind up meeting on the beaches of Australia on their various eco-activism adventures. I really enjoyed this book. It is marketed as a thriller and adventure, and you get that sense right from page 1. You are drawn into Robert's search for Noah, and while it is nice to revisit characters that you already know, meeting new characters in the sequel is also really well done. Again, like in the first book, there is this mystery of searching for someone, and there's a mystery of who is someone really, and do you know them? This exploration of how far can you stretch love, and very, very high personal stakes. The way the storylines intertwined I thought was really engaging, and I thought it wrapped up the duology very nicely. I love the tourist trail, and this was no different, so if that sounds good to you, then that was Where the Oceans Hide Their Dead by John Yunker. Okay, those were the books that I read this month. I hope you're still here. Thank you for being here if you are. So which was my favorite? I definitely think it's going to be between Once There Were Wolves and Where the Oceans Hide Their Dead. Jade City was amazing, but because it wasn't as much ecofiction as the other ones were, and this is about finding my favorite ecofiction novel, I think it'll have to take a backseat. And because I did suffer from book hangover for days after reading Once There Were Wolves, that's gonna have to be my pick. It is my favorite book of the month of June. So how does that compare with my winner of May, which was Animals People by Indra Sinya? You can check out the video for more details on that in last month's reading roundup. But even though that was quite spectacular, I think Once There Were Wolves was better. I think it was better. It hit me to my core. So that's it. That goes on the tournament board too. Now, how about my winner for quarter 2? That means I have to choose between Limbo by Esther Figueroa and Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaghy. And that is a really difficult decision because Limbo was quite possibly one of the most beautiful books I've ever read. And they are both 5-star reads. So that's just the nature of this tournament board, that I have to choose between them at this stage already. I think I would reread Limbo more often, because while the intensity and the visceral emotion and kind of horror was more intense with Once There Were Wolves, there was less joy in it. And I think the joy and the characters, you just fall in love with the characters of Limbo so much. And I do think I would reread Limbo more, because knowing the pain that was waiting for me in Once There Were Wolves, I don't know if I would willingly sacrifice myself like that. They are both fantastic, but Limbo by Esther Figueroa is still up there. I have a love for it rather than an awe and fear of it. I have a love for that book. Which makes the next face-off kind of a shoo-in, because Limbo outshines Scat by Carl Hyacin. Again, more details. Find the reading roundup where Scat was the winner. I'll link it below and above. I really enjoyed Scat, but it didn't affect me as emotionally and viscerally as Limbo did. So Limbo by Esther Figueroa is my favorite book of the first half of 2022. How exciting. Once There Were Wolves is taking silver. Even though by rights Scat should take silver, Once There Were Wolves is taking silver. Sorry. Maybe Scat can take bronze. Okay, we're done. That was my monthly roundup of everything I read, and now you know my favorite book of June, my favorite book of quarter 2, my favorite book of the first half of 2022. So we've done a lot. We've covered a lot of ground. The books I read this month are The Lightning Tree by Lene Fogelberg, Jade City by Fonda, No Entry by Gila, and Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaghy, and lastly, Where the Oceans Hide Their Dead by John Yunker. Let me know in the comments below whether you've read any of these books, any of the books mentioned in this video, whether you now want to. What have you been reading in the last few months? Do you have a favorite among them? Is there one that has stayed with you? Have you experienced a book hangover? Because I now know that it's quite intense. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I post every Wednesday all about reading and writing ecofiction and how it can be used as a science communication tool. Oh, I should have mentioned that. You learn a lot about wolves in Once There Were Wolves. I should have mentioned that. I should remember my branding. If you're looking for some community around your ecofiction, then join us on Rewilding Our Stories, the Discord server where everyone who is nerding out about ecofiction is welcome. Invite link is in the description below. And that's all from me. So happy reading, and I will see you next week, ecofictologists.